reading The Swan Princess. Far away and long ago, there lived a little girl named Azella, who was the king's only daughter. The queen had died when Azella was born, but she had a kind father and 11 older brothers who looked after her. When Azella's brothers went to school, Azella looked at beautiful pictures of swans. She couldn't have been happier. Then, one bitterly cold winter, the king married again. His new wife was tall and elegant, and everyone admired her. But she had a dark secret. The new queen was a witch. The queen had hated the king's children, and she vowed to get rid of them. She spent her days alone inside the palace, stroking her watery pet toads and dreaming up spiteful spells. 1 week later, the princes came home from school to find the queen bearing their way. "You're not wanted here," she shouted. "Fly away like wild birds." The horrified princes began to sprout white feathers. One by one, they turned into swans and flew out to sea. The queen went inside and told the king the princes had run away. And then there was just Azella. The queen didn't dare cast another spell in case the king grew suspicious. But as the years passed, the queen couldn't bear her jealousy no longer. One night, she secretly dropped her pet toads into Azella's bath and whispered some magic words. These 3 toads will make Azella ugly and stupid and wicked. Azella was too good to be enchanted by such an evil spell. When she stepped into the bath, the toads turned into beautiful flowers. Their red petals gently floated on the water. The queen was furious. She needed a new plan. When Azella finished her bath, the queen made her sit down away from the mirror. Then she wiped Azella's face in walnut juice and backcombed her hair. Now Azella looked like nothing like her beautiful self. Her father didn't even recognise her. "Who let this wild creature in?" he shouted. "Take it away!" The guards tried to seize her. Azella slipped between them and ran out of the castle. Sobbing, she fled and hid in the forest. Azella wandered through the forest until she came to a lake. She knelt down and washed her face with the cool, refreshing water. As the sun set, Azella looked around to see where she might spend the night. Something in the distance caught her eye. A group of swans was flying over the trees. They shook their wings, and to Ella's astonishment, instead of swans, was her brothers stood before her. Azella was overjoyed when they heard her hugging. Prince Julian told her what had happened. "The queen's spell turned us into swans," he explained, "but we will come human again at night. Tomorrow we must fly back to our new home. I'm coming with you," Azella decided. Azella and her brother spent all night weaving a net of rushes so the swans would be able to carry her. As the sun rose, the swans lifted Azella into the air and they flew far over the seas. As dusk fell, they landed. Once again, the swans shed their feathers. "This is our new home," Julian told Azella, showing her a cave completed with soft green moss. At night, Azella dreamed she was still flying through the clouds. In her dream, a beautiful fairy appeared before her. "Azella," she said, "you can save your brothers from the queen's smell. You must make each one a shirt of nettles. When they put the shirt on, the spell will be broken. But you must make the shirts in silence." The fairy warned, "If you speak a word before the spell is ended, your brothers will die." Azella reached out to touch a nettle. It stung her fingers, and she woke up. The next day, Azella set to work. She picked huge armfuls of nettles, and she started to weave them together. They stung her hands, but she didn't make a sound. By evening, her fingers were covered in blisters, but Azella didn't mind. She had almost finished the first shirt. When the princes saw her weep, they knew what Zella was trying to do. They thanked her, but she could not reply. Prince Jasper wept to see her fingers. His tears touched her skin. It healed at once. The next day, Azella went off to pick some more nettles and stopped in an overgrown churchyard. "What's your name?" called a voice from behind her. Azella spun around to see a handsome king watching her. "What are you doing in my grounds?" the king asked. "And why are you picking nettles?" But Azella could not reply. "She can't talk," the king realised. "Come back to my palace," he said gently, "and I'll look after you." Azella shook her head, but it was no good. The king led her through his garden and into his vast palace. Before long, the king was in love with the strange silent girl. When she spent all day weaving nettles, he gave her soft gloves to cover up her blistered fingers, and his kindness made Azella love him in return. Soon the king had made up his mind. "Will you marry me?" he asked Azella. She smiled and nodded. The king summoned his archbishop. "I am getting married," he told him. The archbishop threw up his hands in horror. He thought Azella was a witch. "You hardly know the girl," he cried. "I don't care," said the king. "I'll marry her anyway." "Why, she was weaving nettles." Meanwhile, Azella wove busily. By the night before the wedding, she had made 10 shirts. "I'll finish the last one tonight," she thought happily. As she started the final shirt, she realised she needed more nettles. "I'll just go and have to pick some," she decided. Outside it was so dark she could barely see the graveyard. She shivered. "There's no such thing as gals or ghosts," she told herself bravely. The archbishop was still awake, worrying about the wedding. He saw Azella slip out and decided to follow her. Only a witch would pick nettles at midnight, he told himself. When Azella began wandering among the tombstones, he decided he had seen enough. "Stop, witch!" he cried. His shout brought the palace guards running. On his orders, they seized Azella and threw her into prison. The next day, instead of a wedding, there was a trial. Azella was brought before the judge in chains. "I saw her picking nettles in the graveyard at midnight," the archbishop cried. "She must be a witch." "Well, what do you have to say to that?" the judge asked Azella, but she could not speak to defend herself. The judge frowned. "The girl is a witch. She will be executed tomorrow." The king's heart was broken, but there was nothing he could do. Azella was thrown into a tiny prison cell, and her shirts were thrown in after her. "I'd nearly finished them," she thought desperately, "but how will I ever see my brothers again?" She felt completely miserable. Suddenly, something fluttered against the window. Azella looked up and saw Jasper looking back at her. She held up the shirts so Jasper could see them. He bowed his head and flew away. "I mustn't give up," Azella told herself. She spent all night weaving the final shirt. At dawn, there was just one sleeve left to make, and then she ran out of nettles. Minutes later, there was a bang on the door. The guards had come to take her away. They led her outside, still clutching the shirts. The huge crowd had gathered to see the execution. Before it could start, there was a startled murmur, and people began pointing at the sky. 11 white swans were flying closer and closer. The swans swooped down one by one. They swept past Azella so she could throw the shirts over him. The crowd gasped. There was a shimmering in the air. And then, instead of the swans, 11 young men stood beside Azella. At the same time, Azella's chains turned into white roses and fell on the ground. The spell was finally broken and Azella could speak. "Oh, Jasper," cried Azella, "you still got a swan's wing." "I don't mind," he replied, giving her a big feathery hug. The king spoke. "I didn't know what was going on here," he said, "but perhaps you can tell me at the wedding feast, if you still want to marry me," he continued, turning shyly to Azella. "Oh, yes," said Azella, smiling, "and there won't be any witches at this wedding, I promise." Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the book. Bye! Don't forget to like and subscribe.